Hello.
Hello, police.
Yeah, what's the problem, sir?
We just drove down our farm track.
Yeah.
Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it.
Yeah.
It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
The following newspaper article comes from the 4th of September 1997, with the headline, "Drug barons were lured to their death, jury told." 3 drug barons found gunned down inside a Range Rover were lured to their deaths with the promise of a lucrative cocaine deal, a court heard. The near-frozen bodies of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe were discovered by farmer Peter Theobald and his bricklayer friend Ken Jiggins in a lane by the A130 in Rettendon the day after the executions in December 1995. An intensive 5-month investigation followed, which got its big break when detectives arrested police informer Darren Nichols on a cannabis charge. He now provides the basis of the prosecution case. Andrew Munday, QC, told the Old Bailey that the killings were the result of a falling out between Mr Tate and defendant Michael Steele, who became friends after meeting in a Suffolk jail in 1993. But he claimed the relationship soured when a dispute arose over a cannabis consignment of very poor quality, which Steele, his right-hand man Jack Womes, Peter Corey and Mr Nichols had allegedly imported. Mr Munday said Steele, an experienced navigator and pilot, had bought a rigid hull inflatable boat worth nearly £14,000 to smuggle the drugs from Belgium to England. Pat Tate had paid for around £70,000 of the consignment with money raised from friends. When the cannabis proved to be dud, he was given the cash back, but he told his investors that Steele had failed to repay him. Mr Tate also told them he would kill Steele after forcing him to get on his knees and admit it, the jury heard. Mr Munday added, "Dealing in drugs is not an honourable trade. It's often the province of the double-cross, the sting and double dealing. They are beyond the law, and the remedies they take themselves are often lawless." He said when Steele decided to murder Mr Tate, he told him a consignment of cocaine was due in Essex. He suggested they could kill the courier and take the drugs for themselves. Mr Munday said, "It was a baited hook for Mr Tate, Mr Tucker and Mr Rolfe. It was a ruse to get these 3, but particularly Tate, to a deserted and therefore quiet farm track where no one would or could witness what Mr Steele and his right-hand man, Mr Womes, would do." On December the 6th, 1995, the 3 unsuspecting but no doubt excited men sat in an apparently relaxed position in the Range Rover, and you may feel with cold, ruthless and merciless efficiency they were killed, each shot a number of times through the head. Dismantling the guns they had used, Steele said, perhaps half in revelry, "That sorted those out. They won't be threatening me again." After the lawfulness of what they had done, you might think it rather chilling that they had time to laugh it off. The jury heard forensic evidence showed someone had probably laid in wait for the Range Rover in grass at the side of the track. Only 7 shotgun cartridges were found at the scene, although 8 shots were fired. Most were fired through the rear offside passenger door. Mr Munday added, "It's probably a pump-action or self-loading shotgun that was used." The case continues. The next newspaper article comes again from the 4th of September 1997, with the headline, "Murder Trial Told of Angel of Death." An alleged drug dealer likened himself to the Angel of Death after taking part in the executions of 3 accomplices in a dispute over poor quality cannabis, an Old Bailey court heard yesterday. After the trio was shot with cold, merciless efficiency, Michael Steele said he felt a bit like the Angel of Death, and that he had done everyone a favour, and got rid of the sort of people you would not want around. Andrew Munday, QC for the prosecution, said he was likening himself to someone who had power over life. Patrick Tate, 37, Anthony Tucker, 38, and Craig Rolfe, 26, all from Essex, were assassinated as they waited in a Range Rover on a remote farm track in Rettendon, Essex. They had been lured there on the promise of a substantial future cocaine deal, it is alleged. As they left the murder scene, the prosecution alleged that Steele was clearly discomforted by what had happened. In a conversation with another alleged drugs conspirator afterwards, Steele marvelled at the way his partner had acted, according to the prosecution. He said he was a cold-hearted bastard, his partner, Jack Womes, because as soon as he got out of the vehicle, he put shots into each of their heads within a matter of moments. He said it was a natural act, almost as if he was doing something else, Mr. Monday told the jury. He said that Steele had shot one of the deceased with both barrels because that person had moved. Steele believed that Mr. Tate had threatened him over an earlier shipment of poor quality cannabis, and decided with Womes to eliminate the threat once and for all, the prosecution has alleged. The trial was adjourned until today. The next article comes again from the 4th of September 1997, with the headline, Getaway driver told police of killings. A getaway driver for 2 killers who used shotguns to execute 3 fellow drug dealers in a country lane later became a police supergrass, a court heard yesterday. The 3 men were allegedly killed in Essex over a row about a consignment of poor quality cannabis. They were lured to their death by a bogus promise of a major new cocaine deal. Following the execution, one of the killers likened himself to the Angel of Death, the Old Bailey court was told. The accused murderers, Michael Steele, 55, and Jack Womes, 36, were driven away at high speed from the shootings, allegedly laughing at their actions in shooting the men in the head as they waited in a Range Rover on a snowy night in December 1995. Steele said he felt a bit like the Angel of Death. He had done everyone a favour and got rid of the sort of people you would not want around, said Andrew Monday, QC. Steele from Clacton, Essex, and Womes from Brockford, Suffolk, wore surgical gloves, overalls and Wellington boots for the murders at point blank range, and afterwards were splattered with blood, according to counsel. The getaway driver for the murderers was another criminal called Darren Nichols, 31, who later told police about the incident, the jury heard. Nichols from Braintree, Essex, will be a major prosecution witness at the trial. Womes and Steele have denied murdering the 3 men. They and the third man, Peter Corey, 45, from Clacton, also deny conspiring to import cannabis in late 1995. Steele believed that Mr. Tate had threatened him over an earlier shipment of poor quality cannabis and decided with Womes to eliminate the threat, the prosecution has alleged. Steele marvelled at the way his partner had acted, according to the prosecution. Quote, he said he was a cold-blooded bastard, his partner, Jack Womes, because as soon as he got out of the vehicle, he put shots into each of their heads within a matter of moments. He said it was a natural act, almost as if he was doing something else. It was emotionless. He said Monday told the jury, he said that Steele had shot one of the deceased with both barrels because that person had moved. He said he had reloaded and shot the other 2 and the gun had fallen apart. The case continues. Okay, so let's just talk about the end of that article there, and that's probably why these articles are so important. A lot of them will seem very similar in that they mention some of the same quotations spoken about in court, but all of these articles mention different details, or they give you a little bit of added information in each one. Now, to the bottom here, let's just quote what is stated in this article. Quote, he said that he, Steele, had shot one of the deceased with both barrels because that person had moved. I can only imagine that's Pat Tate. He then goes on to say, he said he had reloaded and shot the other 2 and the gun had fallen apart. Also remember that before this, Womes has approached from the back door and shot the 3 individuals straight away. So we're talking about 2 guns, 2 gunmen. Now, it even goes into more detail here. Now, I've never actually come across this exact quotation during the summing up in court. This is really interesting. The fact that he said that he reloaded and shot the other 2 and then the gun had fallen apart. Now, what supposedly happened is that Darren Nichols is driving them away from the crime scene and Michael Steele is talking about how he shot them, how Womes shot them, and then Darren Nichols is recalling those events to the police. Now, what bothers me, I guess, the most, and I spoke about this in one of these previous episodes, is not once during these police interviews, not once during the cross-examination of Darren Nichols by the defence, is it mentioned that only 1 gun was used. So how can Darren Nichols' sort of recollection of events that evening be the truth? That's not to say that what he's saying necessarily isn't the truth, but there's no way that Michael Steele could have said to him that he had shot the individuals as well as Jack Wombs, because we know that supposedly one of these guns falls apart, and we also know that only one gun was used to fire all of those rounds. Now, this is one point of the case that I can never seem to wrap my head around. It's the fact that Nichols is never ever pulled up on this point during his police interviews. Now, surely they could just say to Nichols, you're saying here that Steele has shot these individuals, Wombs has come out of the bushes beforehand and also shot these individuals with his gun. There's two guns, there's two gunmen discharging rounds. Now, Darren, the problem we have here is that only one gun was used in this crime. He's never been put under any pressure whatsoever regarding this point. We need to remember that the police had this information that one gun was used in this crime on December the 9th, just 2 days after they discovered the bodies of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Why has it never been put to Nichols that his version of events concerning the conversation that he had with Michael Steele and Jack Wombs after the murders were committed could simply not be true? It also ties in with the documentaries, the one that came out a few years ago, where Steele pushes the gun against Tate's torso or Tate's head, whichever it was, and couldn't bear to pull the trigger. Then he said, "Stop squealing, Pat," and slowly pulls the trigger of his own weapon. You know, this is just false. There's one gun that we're looking for here. One gun which killed Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Not two, just one. And the reason this has got so confused over the years since 1995 is because Darren Nichols' version of events was that Steele discharged his weapon, Wombs discharged his weapon. That's where all of this confusion has come from, yet Nichols has never been pulled up on this point. The next newspaper article comes from the 5th of September 1997 with the headline, "Farmer's Shock Over Gun Blast Bodies." The farmer, who chanced upon a Range Rover containing the bloodied bodies of 3 drug barons, admitted he was astounded when police claimed it had been parked there overnight. Peter Theobald told an Old Bailey jury he thought the vehicle and its grisly load could only have been there a matter of hours, as there was no ice on the windows and no snow on the roof. Yet when he and his friend bricklayer Ken Jiggins had set off from nearby White House Farm that fateful morning, they had been forced to de-ice their own Land Rover. It had been frosted up by the cold weather and a light layer of snow which had fallen. Mr. Theobald said, "I just don't think that Range Rover had been there overnight." On December the 7th, 1995, Mr. Jiggins was with him as they drove down the remote and bumpy track at about 8 a.m. It had snowed sometime during the night and the pair, wary of poachers, kept an eye out for fresh tyre tracks on the lane. But as they reached the last gate before the woods, they found a Range Rover blocking their way. Mr. Jiggins went up to the vehicle and tapped on the window before making the gruesome discovery of the bodies inside. The pair alerted police, and the 2 uniformed officers who arrived less than 20 minutes later faced a daunting task. PC Barry Knights and Sergeant Chris Atkins had been on normal uniform patrol when they received a call to Rettendon. Neither was prepared for the scale of destruction they found. When they saw the 3 slumped figures, they got straight on the phone to the force's Chelmsford HQ and asked for reinforcements. Within hours, the quiet country lane was swarming with police and scenes of crime officers as the huge investigation began. The trial continues. The next newspaper article comes from the 8th of September 1997 with the headline, "Lawyers Seize on Police Discrepancies." Lawyers for 2 men accused of a gangland drugs execution have seized upon inconsistencies in police evidence. The bodies of Craig Rolfe, Tony Tucker and Pat Tate were found inside a Range Rover at Rettendon on December 7th, 1995. They had been blasted to death with a shotgun the night before down remote Workhouse Lane. The Old Bailey has heard Jack Wombs, 35, of Brockford, Suffolk, and Michael Steele, 54, of St Mary's Road, Great Bentley, Essex, lured them to their deaths with the promise of a lucrative cocaine deal. Police officers descended on the murder scene when it was discovered by a farmer and his friend on their way to feed pheasants. Scenes of crime officers Detective Inspector Hughes and Detective Constable Peter Bettis combed the area and made a note of all the evidence collected. However, the officers disagree on where one particular shotgun cartridge was found, and despite hundreds of photographs being taken, there is not one of a cartridge Detective Constable Bettis claims he recovered from the Range Rover's rear footwell. He admitted it may have been accidentally kicked into the position he found it. Steele's QC, Graham Parkins, who has quizzed each witness about their movements at the scene, said, "Despite a cordon being put up, at least one member of the press wandered onto the scene. It is just an unhappy factor in this investigation from day one." Detective Constable Bettis said, "Press people were around all the time. It was difficult to get them away." The Range Rover, covered by a tarpaulin, was transported to a police garage at Southwood and Ferrers, where the 3 bodies were removed. Driver Rolfe was found to have £104 on him, passenger Tucker had £870, and Tate, who was in the back seat, had £480. In the boot was an empty head sports bag. Detective Constable Bettis confirmed none of Steele's fingerprints were found on any exhibits seized at the scene. Mr. Tate lived in Gordon Road, Basildon, Mr. Tucker at High Road, Fobbing, and Mr. Rolfe lived in Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100. Okay, many thanks for joining me in this episode. Shortly in front of you, you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, and also the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient playlist. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.